Hey everybody, Reality Check, Jay Weidner. Thanks for watching, or do appreciate you watching, and share, subscribe, and all that other stuff. I'm going to be doing a series soon on my book, Mysteries of the Great Cross of Henday, Alchemy at the End of Time. And it's going to be a multi-part series. I'll probably be starting it next week. And one of the things I want to show you is the inscriptions on the engravings on the cross of Henday, and we can see this is the pedestal, and then this is the Latin inscription on the cross above it. And Fulcanelli tells us that that Latin inscription is describing a place of refuge in the world somewhere. And I became intrigued with this mystery, as you guys know, and I spent years trying to unveil the anagram of that inscription. And one day, while waiting for a subway, I had a piece of paper with the inscription on it, and I translated it immediately. I saw what it said. It said, Inca Caves, Cusco, Peru. And then immediately I found a secondary message in the Latin, and that was, Hail to the cross at Urcos. I had no idea what URCOS meant. So when I got home, this was before the internet, I pulled out my atlas and I looked at Peru, and I saw there was a city nearby Cusco called Urcos. Later, I met a shaman, a Quechua shaman, and I asked him if there was a cross at Urcos. He said, yes, on the lake, there's a cross. It's been there for centuries. And so then that intrigued me, and I went off to Peru, and my first trip was in 1997, been there many times since. And when I got to Peru, I realized that I was not in some just place. There was something here that happened a long time ago, and it was really important. And I've been intrigued by it ever since. And then I got to meet my guest today, Brien Forester, and he's been the man for finding out what's going on in Peru. And so I want to introduce you to explorer. Probably you already know him since I checked out his YouTube today. He's got 330,000 subscribers and 81 million views on his videos. It's unbelievable. Anyway, Brien, how you doing?
I'm great. Good to see you again, Jay.
Good to see you. You're one of my favorite people. Are you down in Peru right now?
Yeah, I live here full time.
Yeah, beautiful place there where you guys are at. I visited there in 2017, and right on the beach. Oh my gosh, so beautiful! I couldn't believe it. Yeah, so let's just talk about Peru generally. Then we'll get into some of the stuff that you've discovered. What do you think? What do you think generally happened in Peru? Was there a civilization there before the cataclysm that happened like 13,000 years ago or so? We all know about that. I've talked about that frequently on the show. But do you think there was a civilization there before the cataclysm hit, or what did it arrive after?
No, it seems that there were probably at least two very advanced civilizations that existed in Peru and Bolivia. Whether they were related or not, we don't know. But anyone who knows anything about ancient Peru and about Cusco knows for sure that the Inca found an abandoned megalithic city, and they rebuilt it, because the megalithic work there is perfect stone joinery without mortar or anything like that. And then the Inca work is much simpler, built on top of it. And you also see cataclysmic damage to the stonework as well, as if it was hit by earthquakes or plasma ejection or a combination of different events.
Yeah, the cross of Henday seems to indicate it was a plasma event of some kind, possibly coupled with comets. Fulcanelli says it was a double catastrophe. So my theory is that comets must have hit the Earth and threw us into the Younger Dryas, and then according to Robert Schoch's work, a coronal mass ejection or a giant plasma event of some kind occurred that stopped the Younger Dryas and right in its heels. and it's just stopped it and immediately ended. And of course, then we had the resultant floods and all the other things that happened at the end of that. So, so even the mythology of Peru talks about an event and them going into the caves of the mountains. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the Inca actually emerged out of a cave about supposedly about 1,000 years ago in the Cusco area. Though most historians say that the Inca evolved around Lake Titicaca and then migrated about 1,000 years ago.
That's interesting. And when they arrived, I was reading Pizarro's book that he had a guy that went with him and wrote a book about the expeditions and everything. And I was reading that,
Yeah.
and he described how do you say his name? Atahualpa, the leader of the Inca at the time. Yeah, he
Yeah.
had white skin. I was really surprised to see that when I was reading these diaries. And what do you think of that?
Well, it's likely that Atahualpa was, of course, he was at least part Inca and part Ecuadorian. But what's stated by the accounts of Pizarro is that when they first arrived in Cusco, they saw that there were very light-skinned people who were quite tall and had red hair, and some had blonde hair. And it wasn't actually Pizarro, it was his brother, one of his brothers who saw that. And he asked the Incas, he said, "Who are those people?" And he was told, those are the last of the Huiracochan, the ancient ones. And so that, that obviously shows that there were people not indigenous of Peru who had existed for a long time in Peru prior to the arrival of the Spanish conquest.
Right. And that's kind of what you have a museum there in Paracas with these, are they mummies? I guess they are mummies, right? And they have red hair. And these are what, the ancient Paracas people?
Yeah, that's right.
And since they seem to be like European or maybe Middle Eastern, where do you think they came from?
Well, we've done quite a bit of DNA testing of the mitochondrial, which is maternal DNA. And of the 20 skulls we sampled, only 2 showed Native American ancestry. The other 18 are closely related to elongated skulls found around the Black Sea area. So that means a migration from Eurasia, probably about 3,000 years ago, not via any land bridge, but they had to have sailed from there. So that was quite surprising. And of course, the academics are completely ignoring this information, but that's what the data is indicating.
So, I mean, is there any relationship to like the Phoenicians? Because they were sailing around.
Yeah, well, the Phoenicians supposedly entered the Amazon basin area, went up the Amazon River, and then built constructions in the area of the Andes, and that too was probably about 3,000 years ago.
Yep.
But not related to these people. These people came from Eurasia across the Pacific. I did a study of wind and currents, and it is plausible that that could be done.
So they came from the Pacific. They didn't go around the horn or anything. That's pretty incredible. That's amazing. That's so 3,000 years ago, that would be, okay, the Phoenicians were in full swing, so boat building was pretty much a universal thing by then. So I guess it's possible that if somebody could have built a boat and gone the other way. It sounds like a hell of a journey.
Well, it does, but again, I've done the mapping of winds and currents, and it's plausible that this could have been done. The kind of boat could have actually been a reed boat, because in the area that they would have gone through, like around Iraq, there are still reed boats to this day. So they could have built massive reed boats and sailed the Pacific, and of course there would be no remains of those at this point. But there are tortora reeds that grow in this area, which are the same as at Lake Titicaca, where there are lots of reed boats that have been made. So they probably were master mariners from their inception to the point of when they disappeared about 2,000 years ago.
And then how did they disappear, do you think?
They were overtaken by what we call the Nazca culture. They were a more tribal people who lived in a little farther north.
Right.
And because the area started to become desert around 2,000 years ago, where these people called the Topara lived was no good for farming anymore. So they entered the lush area, which is still huge in agriculture here at Paracas, and simply took over the land. And like many cultures will do, they wipe out the royalty and nobility and take over the land so that there's no competition.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. All over the planet 2,000 years ago, we had this massive dry out. Not sure what caused it, but I think actually, in my opinion, the Nazca lines with the imagery of the animals that live in the jungle, I think it's like some kind of yearning to bring back the jungle that was once there. And, so as the jungle went away, they drew the lines on the sand as a way to call back the monkeys and all the other animals that are there, and as a yearning. And by the way, I think it's probably going to come back, the rain back to that area here in the near future. I don't know. I know it doesn't rain very much still in Peru, but I think the rains are going to come back. I see a shift in the weather patterns. So I don't know. You'd be the first to know, that's for sure.
That's true.
So these people that lived there, how long did they live there? You say about 1,000 years?
Yeah, most estimates are they lived from about 700 BC to about 100 AD, but very little radiocarbon testing has been done, unfortunately. But that's what the main archaeologists believe.
And these elongated skulls, they're not made by putting the board up against the thing when they're young. Is that how they make those skulls, or are these actually elongated skulls?
Yeah, the oldest ones are naturally elongated skulls. I've seen quite a few babies that died relatively early that had elongated skulls. So that's not something that would be done by cranial deformation. And
Right.
up around Lake Titicaca, we actually found a tiny museum that had a female skeleton with a huge elongated head, and then a fetus that was about 7 to 9 months old. And our expert radiologist who was with us from Texas said that he believes that was mother and baby, and they died during childbirth. And the baby's head was the size of its torso.
Phew. You wonder how the neck could even hold that thing up.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and so these elongated skulls, I mean, there's so much speculation about them, and sometimes I'm afraid to get into them because there's so many wild theories going on about them. That the royalty in Europe had them, and they were wearing costumes to hide them, and the Pope had them, he wearing a hat that hides it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the one thing that's common, and elongated skulls have been found in many different parts of the world, most commonly about 2,000 years ago, from Melanesia to Congo to Stonehenge to Germany to the Maya, the west coast of Canada, and Washington and Oregon, and
Really?
all sorts of different places. Yeah, is that they were the nobility of the group, and that was a way to maintain a distinction between themselves and the common people, was to maintain this look. So after the original elongated skull people of the west coast of Peru started to breed with normal looking people, over the generations, the normal look would start taking over. So that's when the head binding would start,
Right.
in order to maintain that appearance. And then again, when the Nazca people show up, they didn't have elongated skulls, they didn't perform cranial deformation, and they all had black hair. So that's what gives me the theory that the paracas were exterminated.
Right. No doubt. So you say that these elongated skulls have been found all over the world. Is that like, I know it's kind of speculation, but is that like, are you saying that that's evidence of a past like worldwide civilization?
They could have come from different sources. The Han who invaded Europe, they performed cranial deformation. But elongated skulls have been found recently at Stonehenge that date back supposedly 12,000 years. So You know, the oldest ones have been found in Iraq that go back like 40,000 years. But the only ones that so far that I've seen that appear to be natural are the ones found around Paracas, and then also some have been found around the Black Sea, Caspian Sea area, and they too are almost exactly the same in appearance. There's no sagittal suture line. They're 25 to 30% larger than a normal skull. The foramen magnum, which is where your vertebrae enters the base of your skull, is an inch back from where it should be. So that's all indications of genetics and not head binding.
Right. Can't change the spine, that's for sure.
No.
Yeah, so then is it another species or is it humans? These elongated skulls, or the people that have them? Are they a different, I mean, how's the DNA
Well,
testing?
well, again, we've only been able to do the maternal DNA because the nuclear, which is the father's DNA, is very, very small, and it degrades very fast. So these people are 2,000 plus years old. The fact that we're able to get any results is amazing. But so far, the experts who are recently talking, this includes doctors and chiropractors who have examined these skulls, they say because the foramen magnum is an inch farther back than where it should be, that they are at least a subspecies. They're not Homo sapiens sapiens, they're probably Homo sapiens paracas. So that would mean, you know, a lost lineage that academics don't recognize at this point. But the same thing happened with Neanderthal. Neanderthal was originally scoffed at, Denisovans were scoffed at, the little people of Indonesia, Homo florensis, they were scoffed at, and until there was enough evidence, and then they had to accept it. So that's why I'm still working on this project, because I can't give it up. Even though I'm not getting any support from academia, I'm going to keep going with it because it's, you know, I happen to live here, and the ancient cemetery is half an hour drive from my house. So
No, your work you're doing is amazing, especially now you've got drones. It's like we can really get a view of what these temples and places look like. It's amazing.
mm-hmm.
And fascinating. Really makes me wish I'd had a drone back in the old days when I was going there. I better look at these things. So do you think that these were the people that built like Sacsayhuaman and all of those other monuments that were pre-Incan?
Well, someone like them, but much farther back in time, because at every ancient site in the highlands of Peru where there's a museum, there are examples of elongated skulls in them. And of course, they're labeled as being Inca, but they've never been radiocarbon dated. So they can't, you know, that hasn't been proven. So that's the theory we're working on, is that there was an ancient lineage that, you know, was quite a bit different from who we are, that were capable of doing the megalithic work in the highlands of Peru and Bolivia.
Fascinating. So you were you did a recent video about a month ago about the temple in Bolivia, or I don't know what it's a temple or what it is, the construct in Bolivia that had the magnetic rocks in it. Could you explain this to us? Because for some reason, I think this is vitally important.
Yeah, it's a site called Puma Punku, also Tiwanaku. Tiwanaku are the same location, it's just they're behind different fences. So they have different names, but we see obvious megalithic construction in both locations, different from what we find in the highlands of Peru though, because these are almost perfectly straight lines, whereas the stuff around Cusco is polygonal, and the walls tend to be kind of puffy. So it's one of the most fascinating locations in the world, one of the least understood. The people who actually work there know basically nothing about it, except that a culture called the Tiwanaku lived there for about 1,000 years, from around 100 AD to 1100. But you know, whoever did this megalithic work obviously had very advanced machining technology. And the stone, there are two types of stone. One is a a red sandstone that comes from about 8 miles to the west. And then the other is a gray andesite,
Yep.
which comes from about 50 miles to the north. And the largest stones in andesite are around 11 to 12 tons, and the largest in the sandstone are 130 tons.
Whoa.
And so there's no way the so-called Tiwanaku culture did that, even though the academics won't admit that. The terrain is very mountainous, so the quarries are behind mountains. They would have to be brought over these mountains to the location. But the red sandstone, if you take a compass or a Tesla meter, you get no reaction whatsoever with the red sandstone. But with the gray andesite, a compass or a Tesla meter, they go simply crazy when you bring the instruments close to contact with the stone itself. You'll have, in some cases, the needle of the compass will turn 270 degrees, and then you pull it back and it goes back to normal again, because the normal magnetic field is running east to west, the background magnetic field. And yeah, and so we've also taken divining rods there and put them over top of some of them, and they'll start spinning by themselves. It's like perpetual motion. So it's a crazy effect. So far, it's the only one that we've been able to find this magnetic anomaly. But we also had a Canadian geologist with us 3 times, and she said the stone contains magnetite, which is magnetic. But since each stone doesn't react to the magnetometer exactly the same way, she says that the magnetism wasn't laid down when the stone was molten. It has to be an after effect of some kind.
Oh.
So that's what makes it a really bizarre location.
Wow. Like somebody had to charge it after it was built.
Yeah, well, or it could be that part of in the transport of the stone from the quarry, 40 to 50 miles away, that the whatever mechanism was used to probably levitate the stone, that it charged the stones with some kind of magnetism, which is still detectable today.
But this was probably done on purpose, I would say.
Yeah, I would think it was on purpose. An effect of whatever instrument was used to move the stone. And of course, some people are going to say levitation is ridiculous, but there's no way that you can find a normal explanation of how a 131-ton stone is transported 8 miles from a quarry across a bunch of mountains when you're also above the tree line, because you're at 13,000 feet above sea level.
And the landscape there, I mean, if you haven't been there, that is really improbable. I just got to say, it is craggy and rocky, and you're high up, and there's no oxygen, and that's just crazy. But so I'd like to really. Okay, so when of my own findings, I'm learning that, and I have known for a while, that a lot of the constructs in Europe, like the cathedrals, were not really built for worshiping in Christianity. They were built for other purposes, which remain mysterious for the most part. But basically, they're like transducer centers for etheric energy, you might say, or plasma, which is around us. And so they're like places where you go to get healed and things. And that's exactly what they tell you that they are. If you're you're sick, please come in 24/7. And then we know now from what's his name's work that the Great Pyramid is a plasma generator, literally a plasma generator, and Christopher Dunn's work. And so when I saw your video at this place with these magnetic stones, I started thinking, what is this place really? What's it for? What's its real purpose for? And and do you have any like speculative theories on what this was built for?
Well, it seems to be very pragmatic, and like you say, everyone calls everything a temple, a sun temple, a moon temple, but that's the interpretation of the later culture that adopted them, because they had no idea what the original function was. But the interesting thing is they've only recently fully excavated the perimeter of Puma Punku. And what you have is, it's like a series of platforms that go up on 5 levels. So the first 4 levels are the red sandstone. And then the 5th level is the gray andesite, which is magnetic. So it appears that the sandstone was acting like an insulator of some kind.
Exactly.
And then the gray andesite created a magnetic field.
That's right.
That could have been definitely could have been used for healing or other things like that. But it's, you know, when you go there, it looks, it's like the Great Pyramid. They look very pragmatic. They don't look symbolic at all.
No,
It's
that's
like
why I
they
find it so
performed,
fascinating.
yeah, they performed some kind of actual function utilizing the energy of the earth, maybe of underground water as well.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what makes it so mysterious, and that's why I think I've been there 60 times, but I keep going back because it's like a giant book opens up, and I'm able to read 1 page, and then the book closes again,
I know the
and
feeling.
the message is, come back if you want to learn more.
Yeah, well, watching your video made me want to go. I'll tell you, if it wasn't for all this stupid stuff with the flights and travel, I would have been on a
Mhm.
plane right away to check that place out. This is amazing. I've been to the area, but somehow I missed that place. I don't know how I missed it. Um, I'm sure you're familiar with the guy. I forget. I think his name is Arthur Poznanski. He was a.
Yeah.
What do you think of his work?
I've actually, my computer right now is sitting on top of volume 3 or volume 1 and 2 of his book. He wrote this huge,
Yeah,
these 2 books that are about that thick, that are full of diagrams and ideas and theories. And he was there for 50 years. He was the first person to actually excavate Puma Punku.
yeah,
I think when the Tiwanaku people were there more than 1,000 years ago, they just saw it as a little hill. They had no idea that there was all of this amazing stonework. But he spent 50 years studying Puma Punku and Tiwanaku. And in terms of alignments with north, south, east, and west, he noticed that one of the so-called temples was off alignment, and by that he was able to figure out that it was probably 17,000 years old.
that's right.
So again, much older than the Tiwanaku people. So yeah, I think his work is vital. He was scoffed at all during his life, but now people, like, is typical, when somebody does profound things and dies and is unrecognized, then people start looking at his work, like Tesla, the way people are looking at Tesla stuff now. So yeah, he was the ground, the real, groundbreaking scholar of that area.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that because I've always been a huge fan of him and his work, and I know what he went through. And yeah, amazing stuff. The way that he dated the buildings and the constructs and all of that was just amazing. And that timeline would probably does go in hand with what you're finding, don't you think? Like these people probably existed about 17,000 years ago in the area.
Yeah, well, again, we're based on the Younger Dryas theories. We're talking about a series of cataclysms happening between around 13,000 and 12,000 years ago. So
Yep.
when people say, how old are these structures? Because we see the cataclysmic damage, in some cases you see heat scorching, much higher temperature than a normal fire. So that would reinforce Robert Schoch's idea of solar plasma. So, all I can say is pre-cataclysmic, so at least 13,000 years old.
Yeah, that seems to, well, the esoteric people like Fulcanelli and Blavatsky, and I don't know where they get their information. I'm more of a science guy. I don't really do channeling or anything, but they seem to have correctly predicted what science is now discovering, which is a curious thing.
Yeah, well, very much so. And it's there are a number of different researchers who are talking about the same time frame of the Younger Dryas events. That's being backed up more and more by increasing scientific evidence. So it's a fact at this point. You can't say, that's the timeline we're looking at. Some are saying that the biblical flood took place at that time as well, but it was a global phenomenon.
Well, definitely, if there was a 1600-year buildup of ice under nuclear winter type conditions, and then a plasma event comes and melts that ice instantly or close to instantly, and then suddenly the temperature goes up 50 degrees, I think that could cause a lot of flooding.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, like what Jacques says, a rise in global sea level of 350 feet over the course of about 1,000 years. But Randall Carlson backs that up too, saying that there were two big pulses that happened.
Yep.
Where you could have had sea level rise of maybe 50 feet in a couple of weeks or something like that.
Yeah, and again, the science is backing all of this up. They're starting to find, the traces of a lot of water being moved around, and and Randall Carlson's played a big. He's been a big person in that, in those discoveries, and I really would have liked to have been on that car trip with him and Graham Hancock, going around the edges of the Younger Dryas area in North America. And so the Younger Dryas, it affected the world, but how did it affect the area where you live now, do you think? I mean, I've always wondered how South America fared during this event.
Actually, that's a very good question. I've seen vitrification of stone, which is like the flash melting of it, in locations in the highlands of Peru at megalithic sites,
Really?
and also at sites around Lake Titicaca as well. And again, it's intense heat scorching. It came from the east to the west, so
Right.
that would probably be sunrise.
Yep.
On a given day. And we also see a lot of that has happened around in Egypt as well, and Petra in Jordan,
Yep.
and other ancient locations that are far older than what conventional academics say. So that's scientific evidence of major events that happen involving probably plasma ejection from the sun, as Robert Schoch says.
And I just want to say, I'm not bragging, but Robert Schoch attended a lecture of mine about 20 years ago on the Cross of Henday, and he was like right in the front row. And I was like, oh my God, Robert Schoch's watching me. I'm going to, crap in my pants. And I did the lecture, and he asked me a whole bunch of questions afterwards. And then that book appeared, Forgotten Civilization, which is a great book, by the way, very scientifically researched. About a plasma event that struck the Earth. And then there's the Los Alamos physicist Perlato. You know about him? Perlat.
No, I don't.
Okay, so he is a plasma physicist working at Los Alamos, and in these vacuum chambers, right, with plasma in them. And he went out with his wife one day to Santa Fe to go to the Native American art shops that are there in the square in Santa Fe near Los Alamos. And he saw the Southwestern Native American art, and he instantly recognized that those were plasma patterns in the art. And then he started looking at the rock art, the original Hopi and Navajo rock art, and then he compared it to what he was seeing in the lab. And you can go online and see this, and they're exact duplicates of it. So clearly the Native Americans in the Southwest witnessed some kind of plasma event.
Yeah, actually, now I remember, because actually Robert Schoch included a lot of that research in that book.
That's right.
Including diagrams and things. And yeah.
Yeah, so that's amazing. And so where are you going now? What's your next? You're going to keep looking over there in Bolivia and going back there? And is that your main focus of your work?
Yeah, pretty well. I mean, this whole problem we've been experiencing since March is starting to go away here. So Bolivia is almost completely normal at this point. Peru's doing very well. The Peruvian economy is working well. I can travel anywhere in the country I want at this point. So I'll start by moving around locally, and then I'm going back to Egypt in March for my 9th trip, because Egypt's becoming very stable now too. Tourists are going back and stuff
What I
like that.
hear. Yeah, I'll be going
So
there
yeah,
in
I'm going.
June. What are you doing
Oh,
in
good.
Egypt? Exactly.
It's our 9th annual tour looking at evidence of lost ancient high technology and, pre-pharaonic stonework, stuff like that. We also do a lot of spiritual stuff too, but that's the domain of Patricia Awian. My job is to look at the evidence of very advanced machining technology that existed obviously before the time of the pharaohs.
Definitely. They have things there that are absolutely unbelievable. And so your theory is Egypt pre-catastrophe or post-catastrophe?
Pre-cataclysmic,
Really? So
yeah,
you think
because
over, go ahead.
you have sites like Saqqara where you have the Serapeum and you have the 100-ton stone boxes made of granite that are in these underground tunnels. There's no way that's why I keep making these videos, because there's no way the dynastic Egyptians did that. You have to be respectful of what they're capable of, but there's some things are just, you can't say the dynastic people did that work because that required very advanced technology. So that's
Actually
why,
more advanced than we have.
yeah, that's true. Because we according to Chris Dunn, we can't make a 100-ton granite box today out of 2 pieces of stone. It's actually 1 piece of stone. The lid and the box are the same piece.
Yep.
But when he asked quarrying companies or rock cutting companies in the U.S. about making one, because he sent them a picture, they said only if we can use 6 pieces of stone. We can't make it out of 1. So that tells you we don't have the technology.
Yeah. So why would these, so one thing we find from this ancient civilization is the use of these stones. And in your opinion, is the reason why these stones exist, like in Baalbek and in Egypt and in Peru and Bolivia and other places too?
Why stone was used?
Yeah, why build it with stone? I don't understand why carve out these gigantic stones, and is there something in the stone that's important?
Yeah, I think there are certain properties of the stone, like granite is quite high in quartz. So quartz is used for resonance. And also hard stone like that is very resilient, so it can last for an incredibly long period of time. Whereas the buildings we build now, if they're built to last 100 years, we're lucky.
Yep.
So I think those are 2 of the reasons: resilience and vibratory resonance utilization. Because for example, the boxes at the Serapeum, you're allowed to go into one of them, and when you go in, it resonates to ohm and only that sound. So I think that's the function. The same with the so-called sarcophagus in the king's chamber. It resonates to ohm as well. So that's like the Earth's energy vibration several octaves down, but still, that appears to be the esoteric / logical reason for why particular stone was used.
Really, really interesting stuff. That's all I got to say. It's been a real pleasure having you on my show, Brien. I'd like to have you back. Your work is absolutely amazing. That's all I can say. You deserve the 330,000 subs that you got. And I don't know, you're groundbreaker. A lot of groundbreaking stuff that you're involved in. I really appreciate it.
Oh, always a pleasure, Jay. Look forward to seeing you again in person.
Yeah, if they ever let us go.
Well, hopefully June at Contact in the Desert.
Yeah, let's hope. I'm invited, so maybe I'll see you there.
Okay.
All right, Brien. Hey, everybody. I'm Jay Weidner's Reality Check. We've been with Brien Forester, and I'll put all the links for him below, and you can go and check out his work. His YouTube station is absolutely fantastic. And like I say, if you're ever in Paracas, go to his museum. It's an amazing museum with the elongated skulls and a lot of other really cool stuff. And I want to thank all of you for watching, subscribe, and all that. And thank you.